Article 1 is adopted.
A flash of restraint to her party. There would be no Democrat gloating.
Adoption of Article 2.
But Nancy Pelosi had got her man. Impeached on 2 counts of abuse of power and obstruction.
Article 2 is adopted.
As Pelosi slammed the gavel down,
the 45th President of the United States,
Donald Trump took to the stage at a rally in Michigan, and a split-screen moment that only he could conjure.
Oh, I think we have a vote coming in. So we got every single Republican voted for us? Whoa. Whoa.
He tries to spin impeachment as a moment of unity, something to cheer. But as he read aloud the votes from an aide holding up a board in the crowd...
Thank you, Haley. Great job.
He started to lower the tone, at one point even mocking a Michigan congressman who died this year.
Then you have this Dingle. You know Dingle from Michigan?
Because his wife, a Democrat, had dared vote for Trump's impeachment.
Maybe he's looking up, I don't know.
A new low even for him. That Donald Trump was impeached last night was no big surprise, and the reality is he will almost certainly be acquitted in the Senate trial. The key now is how all this plays out with voters in 2020, because it's they, not impeachment, who will ultimately decide this president's fate. In this corner of Maryland, voters switched to the Democrats for the first time in more than 50 years in the 2016 election, but only just. 45% of them voted for Donald Trump, and he still has much support here. So how are voters feeling now about the president being impeached?
I think it's a joke, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be a good thing for Donald Trump and a bad thing for the Democrats at the end of the day. So everybody's sick of this witch hunt.
Kathleen Dawn was for impeachment, but she's not sure it will make any difference to Donald Trump's prospects in 2020.
I would hope so, but I don't know. I don't know if people's positions will move, regardless some of his base supporters. But I hope it would. I hope everybody will understand the gravity of the situation.
Just let the man do his job.
Cameron Lilly has voted Democrat locally in the past, but was one of those who voted for Trump in 2016 and thinks it should be up to voters to remove a president, not politicians.
I mean, I understand, people are trying to find something to pin him with because they don't like him, and I think that's really unfair. I think if you don't like him, vote him out, but I think this isn't the way to do it. It's going to just make a lot of people angry.
Many people think that this process has shown that the system is broken. It hasn't checked the president. Do you believe it has, that there's been a point to all of this?
I don't think we should speak about any of these events in the past tense. Donald Trump could eke his way to another against the popular vote re-election in 2020. We could be in a lot of trouble. But here's an opportunity to put down some markers about what is decent and acceptable behavior in a president and what is not, and to mark the president with an indelible stain.
That's what Speaker Pelosi intended, a mark on the president, she says, for the sake of the Constitution.
Right now, the president is impeached.
She knows the president won't be removed from office, but the headlines have been written. And whatever Donald Trump says, the mark of impeachment cannot be erased.
So, Siobhan, what happens next?
Well, John, unsurprisingly, another row has broken out between the Republicans and the Democrats over what the Senate trial will now look like. The Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, saying she could delay sending the charges to the Senate until she can be guaranteed that a fair trial will take place and that Democrat witnesses will be allowed to be called. As for the timing, we still expect that trial to happen in January, and as you say, John, for the president to be acquitted. Meanwhile, though, take a look at President Trump's Twitter feed. He's having his own spin on impeachment and defining it, as you can see here, not as a judgment of him, but as an attack on his supporters. Just as he did last night, John, when he told that rally in Michigan, we've been impeached. Not him, notice, but we. He's trying to rally them to his call, to get them angry, to pump them up. And that is a message, as we saw from those voters in my piece there in Maryland, that will resonate. Ultimately, though, we won't know the full repercussions of this historic moment until Election Day in 2020, when the American people will finally make their own judgment. John.
Siobhan Kennedy on Capitol Hill. Joining us now is Sir Michael Singleton, a Republican strategist who has worked on 3 presidential campaigns. Sir Michael Singleton, thank you for joining us. Can you just tell us, can anything actually happen in the Senate that will shift this whole business of simply having the Republicans wanting to impeach him and the overwhelming number of Republicans wanting to impeach him and the Democrats failing to do it?
No, I think this will go to the Senate at some point, and as has already been articulated by the Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, by Lindsey Graham, who happens to be the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, another very ardent public supporter of the president, and many other Republican senators have already made it clear that they do not plan on voting in favor with the Democrats to convict the president. And even some Republican senators such as Susan Collins or Joni Ernst, individuals who are in pretty competitive senatorial races next year, have sort of released statements that have sort of alluded to the fact that they more than likely will stick to the president. And so I think you will have this trial presented by whomever the Democratic majority in the House selects to present to senators. The senators will look at all of the evidence, and I think it will overwhelmingly go in favor of the president, where he will not be convicted or removed.
Well, now, a third of senators come up for re-election. They must be asking themselves at some point, might my voters turn against me, given what we're now learning on the floor of the Senate?
Sure. I think that depends. CNN had a very interesting poll that came out 2 or 3 days ago that indicated that President Trump's approval rating has now jumped to 45–46%, the highest it has actually ever been in his presidency. And support and for removal and impeachment of the president has actually decreased significantly. And so I think if you're one of those vulnerable Republican senators running in a competitive race, you're going to look at that data and more than likely and see how that data specifically addresses you and your specific state and race and make the determination there. But I think looking at those national polls, that is a very good indication for the president and also a very good indication for Republicans.
It's a stunning reflection on America that the worse the president behaves, the better he gets.
Well, look, I think Democrats did not, from my opinion, I think it would have been more advantageous for them politically to not rush this. I think if they would have went through the court process, which, look, I know it would have taken a lot of time, which was a concern for a lot of Democrats. They didn't want it to impact their Democratic candidates running for the Democratic nomination next year. And I understand all of those things. But I think the more time you take to persuade people to go to court to try to fight for some of those individuals with direct information on the president's behavior, I think you then in turn have the availability and capability of making a direct argument to the American people that there is something wrong here, which then in turn creates the ability to put more pressure on Republicans. I think not going that route was disadvantageous to them.
Well, let's see. I mean, what do you think? How do you think Mr. Trump is actually going to use this in his campaign?
Well, look, I think it's going to be quite simple, John. I think once the president is not convicted in the Senate, I can foresee probably minutes later a tweet from the president essentially articulating the fact that he was vindicated. I can see mass emails coming from his reelection campaign and many other Republican-leaning organizations saying, we knew from the beginning this was a charade. Democrats did this knowing very well they could never remove the president. This was one big distraction. You must support and stand by me. And I think it ultimately will come down to something that a lot of people haven't been placing enough attention on, not the people on the left, not the voters on the right, John, but those sliver of voters in the middle. We refer to those voters in America as independent voters. I personally refer to them as movable voters. Those individuals who could go either way. Whoever can make the most compelling case to those individuals to even turn them out or get them to stay home, I would argue will be the individual who wins in 2020. And I think after the January process in the Senate, the president will have a slight advantage over the Democrats to make that case.
Sir Michael Singleton, thank you very much indeed for joining us.